Now, as you heard, some of the people or organizations that might be held liable for compensation are the Gauteng provincial government and the 27 concerned NGOs and national governments. Various parties calling for the government to account. We're joined by Sasha Stevenson, attorney Section 27, or for Section 27 rather, and Jack Bloom, DA spokesperson for Health. Sasha, or Mr. Stevenson, good evening to you and thanks so much for joining us. And of course, we've spoken to the bereaved families, just the intensity of their pain, considering that this journey could have been avoided with the various interventions that organizations like yourself had raised, and with the MEC and head of department, the DG not listening. It's a bit too late in terms of consolation for these families. But looking at compensation, various names have been thrown in the hat: the national, provincial, provincial government, national government. In your view, where does the blame lie squarely first?
I think this is a complex issue, but the issue of compensation is something that we will be looking at. We represent a number of the family members who have lost loved ones, and we're currently working with our clients, looking at the report and seeing what's available, what the possible legal options are. There are a number, and we'll have to consult and consider them.
Yeah. Just stay on the line, please, Sasha. We also have Jack Bloom, DA spokesperson for Health. Mr. Bloom, as we spoke yesterday, the story just gets more murkier and really horrifying. And now it's not only maladministration, some have called it a genocide, a massacre, downright corruption that has led to the lives of 94 people being lost. And yet we've only had one resignation from the Gauteng Department of Health. This, of course, is not adequate. What are you hearing from the provincial and national health department, or what will you be pressing for?
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
I was just saying, well, what have you heard in terms of the national and provincial Department of Health taking responsibility? We've heard various voices and political parties calling even for the president to be held accountable. But in this particular matter, do you think that more could have been done by yourself as the DA and opposition parties to intervene? Or was it such a tumultuous or rather tense relationship between the MEC of Health that nothing could have possibly done differently?
Well, I think that, on the issue of compensation, I think that nothing can replace the value of a life that has been lost. I think that the relatives have been treated terribly badly up to now. Some of them don't even know the true facts of how their relatives died. And I think that first of all, we need to explain that to them. They need to be counseled. But most important of all, I think the issue of financial compensation, and that I think needs to be done in a speedy and fair manner, and not be like Marikana, which is actually dragged on and on forever. And I think we should learn lessons from Marikana into how one investigates incidents like this and makes redress.
Yeah, but when it comes to best practice in outsourcing certain health state functions, especially when it comes to mental health patients, was this tested as to see whether it is a best practice done elsewhere to outsource this function, or is it a first in your experience?
I'm sorry, I'm just having difficulty hearing. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, we can hear the ambience behind you as well. It is a bit noisy, but I'm saying, is this the first of its kind going against processes in outsourcing the care of special needs patients or mental ill patients?
Well, look, the Health Ombudsman produced a really excellent report, and he made recommendations, and I think they need to be carried out. As you have observed, there has been one resignation of the Health MEC, but I think that this is not enough. It's not the end of the story. I think that various people are looking at suppressing criminal charges, but I would hope the provincial government would also press criminal charges. And when it comes to the issue of compensation, dealing with it in a fair and equitable way without taking too much time.
And looking at the NGOs themselves who are non-compliant, some of them, or if not all of them, their licenses not being valid, not having the proper capacity and skills to treat mentally ill patients, what level of liability would they face? And you know, they potentially wouldn't even be able to pay any compensation, but what kind of action can be taken against them?
Yes, well, we do have precedents in the courts for this, and I think in terms of liability, it could be quite a sizable amount that would be paid out. But I think it's preferable, quite frankly, to come to an amicable agreement if it comes to financial compensation. You know, court cases are long, they're expensive, and in a case like this, I would think that the provincial government should only be too eager to come to a fair settlement so that relatives in some measure get some compensation for all the grief and trauma that they have suffered. But as I've said before, nothing can replace a life that has been lost.
All right, please stay on the line, Mr. Bloomer. Sasha Stevenson, attorney for Section 27. Sasha, you must, I'm not sure if it's still too early, if you have a ballpark figure and specifically who you will target to ensure that one, justice is served, and secondly, that adequate compensation, albeit that it will never be enough, you know, to replace their loved ones. Have you got a sense as to what kind of class action you're looking at, or the amount thereof?
I should say first of all that there has been no actual suggestion of a class action at this point. We're working with our clients and trying to consider what the best options will be, and that may be criminal liability, civil liability, and professional liability. So I'm afraid I can't put any numbers to anything at this point. It's just too soon. We've got to still consult.
All right, but give us a sense of what your clients essentially would demand. And I imagine, again, that first it would be justice and transparency to get to the truth as to what happened to their loved ones. And in the absence of this kind of information, what is expected of the state to assist them during this time?
Well, I think there's a few things that are important. It's important that there is accountability for the people who have made the decisions here, and I've discussed the different types of accountability. It's also really important to our clients that the mental health system as a whole can actually work, and that the people who are surviving, having moved out of life esidimeni, will be in more appropriate circumstances in a mental health system that actually cares for them.
Mr. Bloom, just going forward in preventing a similar incident, you referred to the Marikana, that needs to be a learning in terms of how to interact when it comes to disputes. And in this particular case, there was an opportunity to reverse the decision not to outsource the mental health, or rather mentally ill patients. So how do we avoid such a tragedy occurring in future?
Well, yes, I think we should learn lessons from this. I do think that, you know, to me it's got to be a settlement that is fair and equitable and fairly speedily arranged, because we cannot have this dragging on. It causes extra distress, and I hope that is what comes out of that. But also, you know, there are patients who, as we speak, are in NGOs and need to be moved now. So I think the lessons to be learned also is that nothing like this ever happens again, and that mental health patients are treated with respect and dignity, and we can chart a way forward where everybody feels that it's been dealt with in a fair way. And I'd appeal to the the provincial government of Gauteng to expedite this process and try and keep it out of the courts, in fact, because I think they should be morally obliged to provide a fair settlement to the relatives.
So far, are you comfortable, rather confident in the way this matter has been handled, that going forward it will be dealt with the necessary compassion and sensitivity going forward?
Well, I hope that the provincial government has learned a lesson and that going forward they will be far better than what we have seen experience with this whole distressing incident. We as the Democratic Alliance will certainly monitor the situation and make sure that hopefully there is a fair, equitable, generous settlement for the relatives.
All right, Mr. Jack Bloom, DA spokesperson for Health, thanks indeed for speaking to us. He's, of course, in transit, commuting. We'll stay for a little bit with Sasha Stevenson, attorney for Section 27, just posing that question to you in your comfort levels, or rather confidence in how this matter has been dealt with in the aftermath of the Health Ombudsman's report.
I think it's very important, first of all, that we thank the Ombud for having conducted such a thorough investigation and making such bold recommendations and findings. And we're going to be working together with the Ombud, the Premier and the Minister of Health to make sure that the recommendations are implemented and that the mental health system cares for the people who need it.
Mm. And again, on those that may not even know the whereabouts, the report did say the 94 plus silent deaths, and with an expectation that that toll could even increase. So what kind of assistance is there? Do they have the necessary channels with relative ease to find out more information?
Well, family members who are looking for loved ones can contact the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, who has been doing very good work providing services to families, counselling services where required, but also assisting people finding their loved ones. There's also a family committee that enables for families to come together and to act together on this issue. So there are options for people who are still looking for their loved ones.
Mm. And are you surprised in terms that there hasn't been anything further said from the national government, in terms of what the plans are? Yes, they did say they won't contest the report, and they will also go through it with a fine tooth or a fine comb, rather, in terms of what their obligations are. Are you surprised that there hasn't been anything more?
No, I think this is the beginning of a very long and important process, and we are going to be meeting with the National Department shortly, together with the Premier, and we trust that we'll be able to work together on this matter to resolve it.
Okay, Sasha, thanks indeed for your time. That's Sasha Stevenson, attorney for Section 27, and Jack Bloom, DA spokesperson for Health. We'll take a quick ad break. We'll see you shortly. Stay with us.